I get to introduce Noam. We've had our eyes on Noam Youngrak Son for a while, and they have a really intriguing and unique practice. We feel like they really embody the theme of entangled self, so it's quite pleasing that they're also the first speaker to take the stage to open this chapter of the Tangle. As you heard, Noam is also the host of the workshop, so some of you already know them, but for the rest of you, I get to give a little introduction. Noam is a communication designer based in Ghent, Belgium. Through various mediums from video art and queer publishing to workshops and 3D printed sex toys, they inscribe myths for the underrepresented, conveying stories of marginalized bodies by giving them forms that do not conform to the cis-hetero-normative and colonial power structures. This practice often involves physically inserting themselves in their work in a simultaneously personal, performative, and sometimes humorously absurd manner. Today, Noam's talk will be centered around using domesticity as a method to resist the temptation for scale and spectacle, and to instead attempt to distribute the authority of the designer so that they're no longer a singular and divine creator, but a social being entangled in collective creative processes. So that's quite a tangly start to the symposium. With this, help me welcome to the stage Noam Youngrak Son.
Am I audible to you all? Okay. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me here and your generous introduction, Amanda. Thank you for your generous introduction. That was actually what I was supposed to say in the first slide, but you already mentioned it. But I just want to emphasize, so I'm Noam Youngrak Son. I'm a communication designer based in Ghent. I use they, them pronoun. Amanda mentioned most of it, but I just want to emphasize. I would just like to emphasize once again that main research question of my practice is about less normative ways of disseminating more deviant narratives, and that's why I guess I classify myself as a communication designer, like making publications, not only books, but anything, any design form that can make certain narrative or idea public. And before entering more design-related talk, and also the subject of this talk, like going domestic and being together, I would just like to introduce like where I flew from last night. So, and that's because this background that I live in is a combination of a lot of socio-political factors, such as it's just my queer identity and uh, my non-European citizenship, the European immigration law, the pandemic, the global design education, and so forth, and all those factors in combination brought me to Ghent, Belgium, where I'm living now. So I recently passed level 2 Dutch lesson, which is mandatory for long-term residence permit in Belgium. And yeah, I mean, it was a mandatory course that I had to do at the university. And one of the things that I found really remarkable during the course was the fact that the majority of the students in the course were, of course, immigrants like me, who were mostly coming from the global south, and also the demographics that we had in the classroom really represented which part of the world is currently at crisis. So in my level 1 lesson, which took place in prior to Russian invasion of Ukraine, like most of my classmates were from Syria, Afghanistan, Turkey, also Hong Kong, which kind of indicates the part of the world with political precarity. And more recently, when I passed level 2, most of my class, like more than half of my classmates were from Ukraine. That on the one hand, uh, first of all, yeah, it really indicated where the global urgencies are situated, and but still at the same time, uh, it really indicated then the so-called international design education that I received. I studied in the Netherlands, by the way. I received in the Netherlands. Uh, like how kind of superficial their notion of internationalism was by comparing the demographics of the design school that I studied at and the demographic that I had in the mandatory language course. So I mean, this is no longer on on the school's website, but they were very proud of how international they were, and they indicated like where all their students came from on the previous version of their website. I mean, you cannot find it on the internet anymore because they just renewed their identity completely. But I used the a web archive service to find this image back to share with the public. I mean, it's remarkable. I mean, how that small country managed to attract creativity from all from from the world. And but still, if you closely examine the map, you will be able to realize that it's predominantly North America, Europe, and some affluent countries in East Asia, which is, I mean, I was very impressed about it when I was studying in that environment, but still, it's only allowed to a certain category of students who can uh, afford quote unquote critical design. Uh, and to a certain extent, the school benefits from presenting the diversity in such way that you're looking at. Also, the and just because the school is very proud of this, it the school also kind of encourages their student to be more autobiographical in the sense that the more you reveal about the marginal background that you came from in your for example the graduation graduation show, uh, the reputation the school gains as an international institution will increase. So like throughout the whole study there has been this very subtle push toward the students, especially when they're coming from the marginalized background, to be more outspoken about themselves and uh, to represent their quote unquote exotic identity more more clearly in their work. And of course, this pressure is more obvious if you're coming from either marginalized or foreign background. Uh, and I mean, this makes a lot of sense to an extent that the personal is the political, and uh, our identity and background contains a lot of interesting aspects that could be turned into a very political work. But if this portrayal of identity is primarily driven by this institutional motivation of just promoting exoticism, the personal kind of fails to elevate to the political and kind of remains as an objectified individual. Uh, and uh, uh, yes, and when the practitioners of design become objectified individual, like the way they operate becomes closer to that of a commodity, or the images that are distributed on social media, so that it follows the logic of so-called attention economy, or uh, and that are driven by spectacle. So yeah, I mean, this is, for example, the trash bin of the of the of the school's graduation show, which was huge, which attracted so many visitors from coming from all over the world. That was tackling like a lot of highly relevant issues, but still at the end of the day, all the images there were pushed to be more spectacular, to provide like this like alternative amusement park for the Dutch people, that where they mainly consume. And I think this is like an indication of that. Wait, yes. But as an alternative to this, I've been insisting on going domestic as a strategy. Domestic in the sense that to have the scale that can be accommodated in your domestic space, and this is uh, I think one of the one of the most clear example that I can show you about like how I perceive domesticity in my design practice. So this is a one-person press that I'm running called Cat Hair Press, and all the publications that are uh, presented through under the name Cat Hair Press are just domestically produced with some basic equipments that I've been trying to accumulate past few years. So it's just, of course, it's not like a huge printing workshop, but I have a like functioning Riser printer, a digital printer, and a few 3D printers, and also some basic equipments like cutting machine so that I can produce book with my own hands in my domestic space. And the reason I'm calling this hair press is that it was also a way to emphasize the domesticity of it. So I live with two fluffy cats that are very hairy, so that I mean I'm sharing sharing my bookmaking space with the cats. So by high chance, all the publication that I produce here will contain cat hairs, therefore not so suitable for those with severe allergies. I mean, it's a cute name, but the point is to emphasize the domesticity of it, like the fact that these are all made in my domestic space. And one of the benefits that I get that I was able to get in this publication in this bookmaking practice, like by being small, was the fact that I could produce like relatively small amount of zine, maybe ranging from 50 to like max 200 copies, just either overnight if I have an urgent issue or within a few days, so that I was able to uh, react to the just daily issues that I'm facing in my life uh, in a in a very agile and immediate manner, so that publishing became a sort of a lifestyle for me. For example, I got married last year, and for the I mean also the marriage, like I mentioned in the beginning, is a product of a lot of like not of course it includes love, but apart from that, there's a lot of legal, political uh factors that drove our relationship into this particular legal form of contract called marriage. And as a queer couple, we were reflecting on like how we can kind of position our intimacy within this scheme, so that we created like a manifesto handbook, which is just basically a flyer, like one pager zine that was distributed and read during our wedding, like kind of queer wedding ceremony that took place at the temporal gay bar that we were running as a like the collective that I was a part of was running. And yeah, I mean, if you see this part, if you see this image, this is a snail that is infected to a parasitic flatworm that turns their antenna kind of glaring and flamboyant. And I mean, just because for this parasite, their final host is a bird, so they alternate this antenna of the snail to be more flamboyant so that it can attract the bird so that they can move on to their next host. And I thought like the way we position ourselves into this, you know, I love getting married. I'm very happy about the fact that I'm married, but still the legal system of marriage is based on extremely normative ideas, and we consider the fact that we are kind of using this legal infrastructure is kind of like the way that this parasite uses the antenna of the snail. So that was the idea of the zine. So yeah, I would just like to read like a yeah, just to add a few more words about the space itself and the gay bar that I just mentioned. It was I'll get to this point later during the talk, but I'm a part of a Ghent-based queer publisher collective called Bebe Books, and we're the permanent resident of the very historical like performance venue in Ghent called Voret, and we're using their facade, and we're doing like queer events there. So we also as a collective, we thought our position as a queer collective in this historical institution, like that of a this antenna parasite. But nevertheless, I will just move on to the next example after just reading my favorite excerpt from this zine. So we declare a promise for a lifelong practice of exclusive interdependency and the rise of a gender non-conforming, multicultural, multi-species family consisting of two queer people and two cats. We refuse to turn our exclusivity of intimacy into exclusivity of empathy. As much as we love each other, we will suffer together with every marginalized body on the planet. So yeah, I mean, just because I had this very agile domestic press, I could uh, publish this small scale zine for this fun marriage event that we had. And this is another example. It was when we both got infected to COVID, and we bought like a bulk of the COVID test kit, so that we ended up having a lot of these plastic bags for containing biohazard waste, and I kind of hijacked it and appropriated that as a container for a zine. Yeah. So the zine itself is just about like appropriating the tools and the visual language of public hygiene and COVID measure into that of queerness and kink. But yeah, I mean, it was pre-Russian invasion of Ukraine, so I didn't really mean a lot by having Putin here, by the way. But of course, it has different political meaning now if I show this image in public. But yeah, I mean, the point is that just by having this domestic press, like just in my daily life and yeah, it's just in my daily life, I'm able to I gain this agency of converting these rather like banal aspects of life, such as I mean, getting married and getting infected to COVID, into a more like designed form or like artistic intervention that can be distributed and shared with the others. And when I'm talking about the press, I think one of the aspects that I shouldn't overlook is scalability, because I mean, of course, for sure, this domestic press has a very particular scale that should work differently with big publisher, for example. Like the favorite example that I like using here is that of DNA. Yeah, for those who are not familiar with like what this is, like DNA is a molecule that we all have in our cells that contains genetic information, and it's basically like a polymer, like very long molecule that uh, contains like a sequence of base pairs that can be that are called like adenine, guanine, cytosine, thymine, uh, and so yeah, this is a molecule that contains information like a book, and when the cell replicates itself, when the cell like in the process of cell division, for example, the DNA is also duplicated, therefore the information that it contains can get spreaded, and yeah, I find this as the most small scale, more like the most like bodily scale example of publication or communication design. And for example, this is the genetic, like the genome sequence of a eel, you know, the longfish. And it's basically just like a few, like almost 1 GB of pure text that just consists of 4 letters. So I kind of wanted to convert this into a printed publication. So here, just for you to understand, like I converted these 4 base pairs, like A, T, G, C, into CMYK pixels, so that the like long genetic sequence that is contained in a cell became, yeah, these printed pages. And each square here stands for like 1 chromosome. So in total, like an EO has 19. But I mean, my point is that it, yeah, and I printed these. Yeah, it became quite a lot of like big pages, even though I, the pixel, like each pixel that are presented here, are printed like 300 dpi. So like if you really want to comprehend it, you would probably need a magnifier. But yeah, by the way, anyway, this was the, like I would say, like book translation of the genetic information that is contained in the eDNA. But compared to this, the genetic information that is contained in a virus, for example, is way more compact compared to like almost 1 GB text contained in eDNA. It's just, if I'm not wrong, is less than 15,000 characters, so that it can be just contained in this little uh, little square. And I also tried like translating that into a publication, but like what I want to emphasize here is that like in the case of eel, they're relatively more complex organism, and therefore when they're replicating their gene, there's also a more elaborate like method of like proofreading, like some reactions in the cell that ensures that the DNA that is getting replicated is precise. And it also like if there's an error, it can be edited. But in the case of virus, they're just parasiting their host cell, and then they use the infrastructure, infrastructure of the others to replicate itself, so that there's no such mechanism. And and that's why the replication of virus, such as like COVID in our body, uh, takes can happen at a remarkable speed compared to the replication of the eel genome, for example. And therefore, there's also more chance of error because the pace the the pace of replication is way faster. So instead of the digital printer that I used here, this is printed using Riso, like domestic Riso machine that I have at home. And this was the very first thing that I tried printing out of that machine, so that all the layer of color is badly aligned. I mean, now I do it better, but back then I didn't know how to make it align so that all the uh, pixels are off. But I find this interesting in relation to uh, like the printing method that I used here also, and maybe that's even more precise representation of how their DNA spread, uh, like like digital printing versus like more like low tech, more rapid rhizoprint that um that contains more chance of error, but happening at way more rapid pace. And I think this I would say like different approach that these two species are taking to DNA replication is also accountable for publishing. If I mean what they're doing within their cell is also like replicating information and spreading, therefore like publishing. And yeah, I mean by just showing you this example, I want to emphasize that the strategy that I have in my like domestic press should differ from that of a big publisher. And uh, like I've also tried like the more like typical model of book production and distribution that relies on just shipping and bookstore. That's very unsustainable uh, if it's happening in the scale of a domestic press, because then it'll involve so much like logistic cost and uh, just a lot of stress. So I mean, I've been doing my best the past few years to figure out like a model, how this way of like very small scale publishing can sustain in various sustain in various sense, like not only financially but also ecologically and also personally, because I'm the person who's running it. And one of the yeah, I just want to emphasize here that also, I mean, the examples of model that I'm sharing, that I'm gonna share from now on, is still an ongoing process, and I don't think is like very absolute model that can be like kind of universally applicable. But at least these are the examples that I was able to accumulate past few years just trying independent publishing. So one of the models that I find interesting is a workshop model. So this is like a creative writing workshop. At the same time, an artist talk about the sexual ecology of eels that that also results in situ publication just using digital printer and Rhizo duplicator. So I had to carry like my like basic tools to Amsterdam in this case when the workshop was taking place, and there was artist talk, creative writing workshop using that used a generative algorithm that combines the input from like the short stories that are written by all the participants and turned out into more elaborate like longer text. But after this brief process of writing, I kind of I mean, they were also involved in this process of printing, folding, and binding, and therefore like one zine that they can bring home. Uh, and this model was particularly interesting in the sense that uh, it was their free labor. I mean, like binding and distribution is a very draining job if it's done by one person like practicing bookmaking in their living space. But just by opening that up into a workshop format, even though like they're providing very precious free labor, they paid for their own tickets, and they were very glad. They seemed very inspired by providing this like, you know, labor. Also, just by the fact that they were bringing, they weren't only making the copies for themselves, but they were making the copies that they could give to their friends. So they're also taking care of distribution and logistics, which is sometimes also a very difficult task. Yeah, this was how the workshop took place, and this was what we had at the end. And yeah, it was interesting. Like, I mean, I could still, I mean, in this case, I'm paid by the institution, and the ticket that the people, the participants of the workshop pay. So it's also not a like exploited labor for myself. At the same time, like satisfying the people. So at the same time, like giving inspiration and you know, satisfaction to the people who are involved. So this is one of the alternatives that I mean, this one of the models that I found, and of course, one other aspects that I was able to realize by doing this was the fact that uh, that I mean, if I rely on their hands, of course, it tends to be more. I mean, for example, the foldings won't be as neat as the folding that I would make, and like, you know, stapling and binding isn't always perfect if it's done by the workshop participants. And even the structure of the zine that I find quite simple was uh, wasn't like the easiest assignment for uh, a lot of participants, so that the zines that resulted uh, like after the workshop, of course, was far more like unprofessional or imperfect compared to the zines that I would typically make. But I think this is a good indication that the agency of a designer and producer is kind of distributed, and and therefore I'm not the sole like singular creator and producer in this process. So that in the sequel of this workshop that took place in Delft, I indicated like very detailed like folding instruction for folding, and like which pages are like indications on which pages are which, or the on like printed on the publication itself, so that the outcome the outcome of this, which is the publication, will also contain yeah, like the traces, like these guidelines that these zines were produced together, relying on this workshop model, not by professionals but by all of us. And this is another example that I tried making this publication, this like kind of workshop model of publication, more kind of performative. So in this case, I considered I mean, bookmaking or bookbinding is essentially of the work of gathering the pages and combining into one structure. So I made the pages in a certain way that could be attached on the body of the people, and like kind of like people containing page each gathering in the public space. That was also in this case I considered that also as a more like performative way of publishing and spreading narratives. So like by forming this structure of a human book, we were also able to consume this book by just sharing what the book contains on site. Yeah, like this. And so yeah, this was one model, like relying on workshop that I discovered. And another model that I would like to propose is like really about being doing together, which is also part of the topic of the workshop. So this like I introduced earlier, this is Bebe Books, a Ghent-based queer publishing collective, and so we're like graphic designers, artists, performers, publisher that are all either like the queer themselves or the allies. And yeah, I mean, we also publish like zines together and distribute it. I mean, this is the extent. We also go to book fairs, but this is just this. I think this was in Berlin, but like the like I mean, book fairs can be also very draining sometimes. Also, people participate in it by paying their own money a lot of times. Uh, like but one of the interesting case that I would like to introduce related to book fair and being a collective was when part of our collective went to Istanbul to the book fair that was taking place in Istanbul, and we were aware that some of the zines that we were selling were too expensive. Would be too expensive if we produce it in Belgium, bring it to Istanbul, and sell it there. Because first of all, it will add a lot of logistic related cost, and also just the like the price of printing and like labor is more expensive in the context of Belgium. So we just wanted to make the zines available for everyone there. So the way that we chose at the end was just to bring USB sticks to Istanbul and print the zines with the local publishers there. Uh, yeah, and so and by doing so, I mean by being a collective, I think what we like the wait I yeah like by being a collective, I think the one of the most interesting thing that we can construct for ourselves is that we are able to create an environment in which the publications could be produced, distributed, and consumed. And in like the projects that we've been doing in prior uh, wasn't wasn't only about like producing zines and selling like distributing publications, but just creating an environment where all these can happen. So for example, this summer what we did in Italy, and we built a queer temple in which like various performance workshop and practices were going on. And this was the kind of manifesto zine that was related to the notion of having a queer temple. And it was very surprising that, I mean, I only prepared maybe like 50 copies of it when I was going to Italy, and I thought like just by being there for 10 days, I could just sell all those. But all the copies were gone in the first 2 days because people enjoyed the temple itself too much, and then they just wanted to take the souvenirs. And this also involves more kind of unexpected in situ way of publishing. So, for example, next to our temple, there was this cabin that was that wasn't very beautiful. Like even in prior to this intervention, there was like a large graffiti saying "fuck you" on it, and we didn't want that to be next to our temple. So just like a few days after the construction of the temple, we printed these out and covered up the this house completely, which kind of worked as like a billboard for our queer temple. And I mean, I just wanted to emphasize that like this I mean, we as a collective, we have more we're as a collective we're more significant than like being just an individual publisher, and we're much more capable in the sense that we can create this environment together in which the narratives could be shared. And this is when we were commissioned by design Ghent Design Museum, and they distributed this church chair that you see in the background, and they wanted the local collective to intervene to do something with that chair, but uh, I wasn't a huge fan of the commission itself in the sense that, I mean, chair is so modern. Maybe I'll just read you the excerpt from this scene. Why does a star designer make a chair? A chair is a monument that still adheres to the modernist myth of a genius designer, usually a white straight man addressing a singular idea through his masterpiece. Therefore, a chair is a erected dick. It can only provoke, but cannot contain. We should hollow out a chair so that it can contain stories. So yeah, so we turned the chair into a book, and